vintage things. That's Groucho Marx. That's his cutaway coat that he wore as in A Night at the Opera, which is one of actually the Marx Brothers' favorite of their own movies. That's one of their favorites. And here we've got a hoverboard from Back to the Future 2. You'll remember that Michael J. Fox sort of wrestled that away from a little girl that had handlebars on it and escapes from the bad guys. This is one of Q, the gadgeteer in James Bond series. That's one of the gadgets he gives to James Bond. It's a pocket flare gun. It shoots a flare signal up in the air. That little monkey, that little tiny, beautiful little prop is a wind-up monkey, and it's the one that James Dean finds on the street. He was drunk at the very beginning of the credit sequence of Rebel Without a Cause. He sort of tucks it into bed with a little piece of newspaper. That's that monkey. The John Wayne Rooster Cogburn eye patch. Of course, most people know that he won his Oscar for his role as Rooster Cogburn in that film. And that's, if you look closely, you can see there's a little scrim in the center, so you can see through it. That wouldn't be detectable on screen, but for practical purposes. And we've got, gosh, I forget that guy's name. Darth Vader helmet. That is made in the era of the first Star Wars film. It's made by ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. It's made from all the same molds. The same people that made the screen-used version did that, but this was a touring costume. And this is just the head, so we've got the whole suit on a form. That's what we'll be selling, the entire figure.
Did they use it in other films as well, like Return of the Jedi?
This was not, no. They retain most of the screen-used costumes, so it's very hard to get anything from production. It's about as close as you can get nowadays, you know, from the era too, so that's important to collectors. That is Richard Attenborough's John Hammond walking cane from Jurassic Park, the original that started the franchise. And you know, it's got all those hallmarks, and it's a very elegant shawl that Geraldine Chaplin wore in Dr. Zhivago. We've got some other costumes from that film that'll be in the auction. And this is a very, very well studio distressed Terminator jacket. Now, a lot of people remember Arnold in the leather jacket, but really he came to wear that in the second film. This is the first article of clothing he wears, because if you remember, he materializes naked in Griffith Park, and this is the jacket that he takes away from the punks that he manhandles, let's say, murders. And you know, it's very, very well distressed. It's a really great example of Hollywood craft. You know, bullet holes and stage blood still there, and I think fans
that's super cool.
Instantly recognize that. This has gotten our friends in New York very excited. This is Robert De Niro's pea jacket from The Godfather Part 2, where he plays the young Vito Corleone, and this is in the very famous scene where he assassinates Don Fanucci in the hallway. So that's a pretty iconic piece. Another one we brought for New Yorkers. This is Gary Cooper's Lou Gehrig costume, Yankee uniform from The Pride of the Yankees in 1942, and it's a movie that almost didn't get made because the production just didn't think a sports movie would go, and then they read the farewell speech or saw the farewell speech of Lou Gehrig on a newsreel, and with teary eyes they greenlit the project, so that's why that got made. This is an elegant gown worn by Leslie Caron as Gigi in the film Gigi, which is another example of the beautiful kind of couture almost, you know, costumery that they were making for Hollywood. Sturdy, really beautifully constructed, lots of nuance and details. And some of these
How do they
things,
maintain it so well from 1958?
Luckily, there's enough people that were in love with it, including the costume designers themselves, that they knew how to preserve, keep these things. Some you'll see that are yellow, that are, you know, that have typical hallmarks of age and antiquity. But things like this that are put in a box so that gravity doesn't have its way with them and it's not exposed to elements, they can hold up pretty well.
Do they need to be kept behind like a glass?
It's very good to keep, you know, it's funny. Most people who buy costumes, they want to display them. And one of the enemies of a costume is display. Because even hanging on a form like this that's made for such a thing for a long time, eventually fabric will wear and will get thin and it will tear and it will become threadbare. So the way to keep a costume when you're not displaying it is flat in a box and away from the elements.
That wouldn't be fun, right?
No, you have to take it out every now and then to show it off. That's the nice thing about this business. We got to make sure that we share all this stuff. So this is one of the favorite pieces of fans. This is Sigourney Weaver's Ripley spacesuit. You'll remember her escaping in the first movie. She's in her underwear and she gets into the spacesuit to get away from the xenomorph that's chasing her around. That's a helmet from the film. You know, based on kind of Japanese, structure and costume, and also the great French comic artist Moebius.
The inside's a lot more detailed than I thought.
Yeah, Ridley Scott had such attention to detail, and where he couldn't get the exacting detail that he wanted because of budget or other restrictions, he masked things really well in the alien costume, which is, if you've ever seen the original, it's really a spandex suit with pieces glued on it. And if it had been shot in harsh light of any kind, the illusion would have been lost. So
It's one of my favorite series.
is it? Yeah, it's a great franchise. It was really nice to meet you. Thanks for coming. I hope you had a good time. Appreciate it. These are a couple of set of costumes from Giant. That's Elizabeth Taylor's Leslie Benedict dress. And that's a companion piece to the jet rink tuxedo that James Dean wore in the famous fight scene between him and Rock Hudson, where they're scrapping. They're a little bit tipsy. And that is a very, very iconic Betty Davis wig from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And oddly enough, it was worn, unknown to production at the time, it was worn by Joan Crawford in a previous movie at MGM. So that's got the provenance of two pictures. Some classic pieces. This is Charlie Chaplin's military uniform from The Great Dictator. It's in 1940. That's in really nice condition.
It's an amazing condition.
Isn't it?
I
You
can't
can
believe
still see some of the age on it,
No, you're just on the public. How did you hear about the exhibit? Well, they told us.
And here is Errol Flynn's Don Juan tunic from The Adventures of Don Juan, shot in 1942. That's also in beautiful condition. And, some of these fabrics and some of these materials that you're looking at these vintage pieces don't exist anymore. If you think about it, they don't make gold bullion thread that's in this applique and in this piping. They just don't make it anymore. So some of these pieces are historical for a lot of reasons. Not just their provenance in film, but in the craftsmanship and materials and the art that went into making these things back then.
back when they cared.
Yeah, back when they cared. I mean, they still do, but I mean, everything's so much easier and lighter and more stable now.
It's really
Some of these
interesting.
weren't meant to last, so the fact that they've been preserved is really special. This most people recognize this in this town. This is a Yul Brynner costume from the 1977 stage production, The Revival of the King and I, one of his most memorable roles. And this actually toured in 1978 on that production. These are some examples of some Chaplin pieces. This is Lady Chaplin's bespoke Dior gown that she wore to the opening of A King in New York. So you can see that was made for her body, and every single detail that you find there was created for her.
Do people ever wear these?
Not so much. We don't treat them as costumes anymore. So you'll notice in our catalog, unless it's a pop sale of more contemporary things, we don't even mention sizes because we sell them as relics, just like we would a prop. And most people really want to display them. We're selling memories to people, and they just want to look at them and recall the first movie their grandparents took them to, or things that bring back a lot of
Nostalgia.
personal nostalgia and sentiment. Yeah. This is really special. This is an Irving Thalberg Oscar that he won for Mutiny on the Bounty in 1935, 36, and they're very rare and very fragile. So that one's in a box and strapped down, but that's a pretty special one. He was a very young producer. I think he died at 37 and had already gotten 3 Best Picture Oscars and was nominated for 3 or 4 more times than that. So
Always thought Oscars look amazing.
yeah,
Seeing in person.
it's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. It's totally identifiable. It's like a Coca-Cola bottle. You know exactly what it is immediately.
Yeah.
Right?
I have one at home, but it's just
Do
totally
you? This is Geraldine Chaplin's 1967 evening gown from a countess from Hong Kong. And again, there's a lot of craftsmanship in there, very subtle, you know. If you think about the pattern of the fabric and then realize that they've ornamented it within the pattern with, you know, basically hand beaded everything. There's a lot of work that went into that for an appearance that lasted, you know, who knows how long.